Hello everybody, welcome back to Nasedyanka, the channel where I talk about Bulgarian culture, traditions, customs, and faith. So, yesterday I started creating this video and I completed it and I added effects and different pieces and parts and all the 9 yards until everything got lost. Every single thing went blank. In this beautiful final accomplished moment, everything was gone. Out of memory, out of access. No matter what I did, no matter whatever, there was no accessing it. So I guess these are the perks to technology. And as you, at least those of you who follow me, know, I just keep my videos simple. And so that was big enough for me. But I didn't give up. I decided to come back again today and record yet another version of what I tried to make more complicated yesterday. So today I decided to keep to my simple. I'll just talk and share with you a few thoughts that I had over the past few days. Now, the last video that I posted on YouTube was related to Lazarus Day. And ever since then, there are a few updates. I do take my little notes, so I'm checking in here. Let's see. We did go through Pascha, and the whole week of that period of time in our Orthodox Christian tradition is a very busy, fully engaged week. So it can look something like starting services at 8 a.m. and finishing at 8 p.m. One of the nights, the night of Pascha specifically, I came back home at 7 in the morning and I slept for 4 hours, and then I went back again to church for another service. And that's beautiful. I honor that. This is something that I have consciously chosen to devote my life to, so it's okay, it's good. But it definitely requires additional and extra attention, energy, and investment. Then I came back home from this busy period of time to a week that was busy with work, and that's again okay because it's part of my job and I like it, I take it to heart. Except that week I ended up finding a mouse in the house. I had this little mouse visitor. I had never had a mouse in the house before. I had to basically enter a new phase and research. And what do you do when you see a mouse? Are you imagining things? Are you hallucinating? I really had seen the mouse. It was there, and it turned out that mouse was stealing my sunflower seeds. Now I keep everything in glass jars. My kitchen is just basically stored and organized with glass jars with seeds or beans or rice or whatever. But those sunflower seeds, I had kept them in a Ziploc bag. And instead of locking the zip, I had left it unlocked without realizing. And granted, we live in an old house, and that's what we can afford and we're grateful for. And that little fellow must have found a little hole and come in, through it. Now, what's interesting is so many people tend to freak out when they hear a mouse in the house. I don't know why. People tend to share that they have phobias, they have a lot of fear. Why? Is that some kind of a mass cultural panic? Anxiety? I don't know. I've experienced those with other animals as well, and I've worked through that. But to be honest, I felt for this little creature. So what I did is I purchased mouse motel traps. I looked at all the options. I could have killed them, could have tortured them, could have whatever. It was only one, by the way. And out of all the traps that I set, there was only a single one that got caught. And it's been days ever since that. So it makes me think that it was that one fellow. But it was so cute. It was so vulnerable. And it looked so adorable. And I transported it to a nearby forest and set it free. It was, it was shy, it was trembling, and I was talking to it and I was calming it down. So it made me reminisce on this theme of compassion. And of course, I mean, you know, this is just a fun kind of a story. And if you guys have a fear of mice, hey, that's okay. No judgment. I get it. And if you don't, that's okay as well. No problem at all. But it made me think about what compassion is. And especially because I have been witnessing more and more people share pain, and myself, since I'm outspoken and I share my ideas pretty freely, I oftentimes encounter people who either love me or they hate me. They like me or they dislike me, and that's fine. But most recently, more people have expressed very harsh, critical kind of ideas and words that made me think about what on earth is compassion. And I wanted to talk about this. I dug into my culture because this channel is exactly for this, to share Bulgarian wisdom and lore in the Bulgarian tradition of nasedyanka. In other words, you sit down and you talk, you sit down and you read, you sit down and you do some kind of a craft, and you talk and you connect, right? And you socialize. And I took notes of my thoughts. I wanted to share those things that come from our culture when it comes down to nurturing empathy. So I started taking care of a garden and I've been planting seeds, and the process made me think of this. So one of those things in Bulgaria that we say is търпението е като дърво с горчиви корени, но сладки плодове. In other words, patience is just like a tree with bitter roots but sweet fruit. Another one we say is not everything that shines is gold. Не всичко, което свети е злато. We also say after rain, sunshine. In other words, we may, even though the weather may seem gloomy and it may seem dark, there is hope. When I think of empathy, I think about how many times we miss giving people empathy and they end up feeling stuck in a place that's lonely and misunderstood, unseen, painful. And those things that I wrote down and I'm sharing with you guys were specifically based in this idea that in my culture, in the Bulgarian culture, sharing our pain is something that's positive. It's something that actually contributes to hearing each other and making sacred space for each other. For example, we have this Bulgarian song from the Родопи region that says "Спи житото в пръста, но живее сърцето му." In other words, the wheat is sleeping in the soil, but its heart lives on. And I was reflecting, like, have you ever felt like that when everything seems disconnected and kind of gloomy around you? Maybe you're going through the winter of your soul or the winter season of your life. Periodically we go through cycles of different moods and experiences, and that making you feel like only you know that you're alive. And the problem is that when people don't share our experience of pain and disconnect and confusion, anxiety, fear, pain, loneliness, we may end up concluding, almost like feeling like we're dead, almost feeling like we're numb, like we're really not present. So I thought of this image of the tree. Again, in the Bulgarian language, we say that patience is just like a tree with bitter roots but sweet fruit. Well, you don't always see the fruit on the tree. It actually has to take seasons before you can see the fruit. First, you have to see the blossoms before you see the fruit. But here is the beautiful thing. And I actually drew a little sketch. I don't know if you guys will see it in my little journal, but this was my draft of a tree in winter. And when you think of that metaphor, the tree in winter typically loses its leaves. It looks barren, and the branches are fragile, so they seem like they can easily break. However, did you know that trees grow deeper roots in winter? And so this was making me think about what keeps you going, even when nothing is blooming. So when I've been tending to my garden in this mid to late spring season, I've been reminiscing on this. I hold the seeds and I'm trying to start lettuce and peppers, and I started garlic, and some seeds, they bloom, like they start, like they take pretty quickly, but others take weeks and others even take longer. Some seeds you even have to freeze before you plant, which actually makes me think of the Bulgarian rose being the symbol of our country and culture. It actually needs to go through the frost before it can be planted. It takes several seasons before you can see the blooms, let alone sense the aroma and the fragrance of its sweetness. So everything requires patience, endurance, waiting. And just because we're patient and waiting, and just because we're going slow, doesn't mean that we're stuck. Doesn't mean that we're not productive. Doesn't mean that we are pointless, futile, meaningless. Just because we're dormant doesn't mean that we're dead. And so one of the plants that I am starting is a seedling. It's so cute. It's a little seedling of a cherry tree, and I ordered it online. So pretty much it looks like a stick. It's a dry stick with roots, and I had to soak it and then hope that it's going to start growing inside the pot that I planted it in. Coffee plants. Also, I started trying to grow some coffee plants, and they're just babies right now. And a friend of mine and I were researching and realizing that it may actually take up to 10 years before the coffee plant produces the berries that give us the coffee, which is one of my favorites. To savor this and to imagine that this has taken so long to produce, right? But why am I talking about this? Because, again, I really wanted to emphasize on how important making sacred space for pain is. I had so many discussions in the last few weeks, and I've been observing and reminiscing on cultures, how in my East European culture, it's kind of like normal. That's the whole point of Nasedyanka. It's normal to sit together and to share each other's pain. I remember even when I visited Bulgaria in 2004, one of my many visits back home, I remember going a certain place. Honestly, I forget, was it like the booth or like the store? But I was waiting in line and I was listening to people's conversations, and people complained to each other. They didn't have any barrier, any negativity towards saying, hello, how are you? And the other person responding, I'm not doing well, thank you. And then sharing, hey, is there something I can do for you? Well, such and such thing happened, right? My experience, and my immigration experience, I should say, has been very different. I've witnessed people and the foreign culture that I've moved to tend to rather camouflage and suppress, almost like pain is this wretched thing, almost like it's a sin or something, when in reality pain is it goes hand in hand with being a human. so anyway, I took notes that I wanted to read to you guys about how holding sacred space is actually a Christian call to compassion and presence. It's not only grounded in Bulgarian roots. I mean, I wouldn't say all Bulgarians are practicing it nowadays, unfortunately, but it's really an ancient practice. Christianity teaches us to hold sacred space for pain. So I had this quote that I wanted to share from Romans 12:15. It says, "Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep." It's just one of those examples of how, like, in a world that's eager to fix, explain, or dismiss pain, we are actually called as true Christians, especially as Orthodox Christians, to do something radically different, to stay, to validate, to hold space for one another. And for those of you who are new to my channel, I talk about Orthodox Christianity because Bulgaria is primarily Orthodox Christian. It's part of our tradition, culture, and faith again. It's just what my channel is based on, and I believe in that. Another point I wanted to make was how there is this big problem of bypassing, and bypassing can be spiritual, but it also can be intellectual. In other words, bypassing is when somebody responds to somebody else's pain with platitudes, advice, deflection, anything else to distract except for empathy. And some examples of bypassing could be people saying, everything happens for a reason. You'll be stronger because of this. If they were real friends, then they wouldn't have left you. But the impact of those words is really heavy, because even though these words may have been meant well, they may have been meant to comfort, they often actually silence the grief, and they invalidate the real deep pain that a person is experiencing. They isolate the sufferer. Another point I wanted to make is that pain is sacred. And from an Orthodox perspective, Orthodox Christian perspective, pain is not something that we should escape or rush through, but it is often where Christ meets us most intimately. And Christ on the cross is a great example where he did not bypass suffering, but he actually entered into it fully. He experienced it. He experientially went through it, through the experience. Also, the Mother of God, the Theotokos, the Holy Virgin Mary, she stood at the foot of the cross. She didn't look away. She didn't run away. She didn't bypass. She didn't pretend it wasn't happening. She stayed at the foot of the cross of pain, watching her son suffer. So our calling as Orthodox Christians and as human beings is really to be like her, to be present, to be steady, to be compassionate in the face of suffering. Another point I wanted to make was I wanted to invite you guys to think about the betrayal after loss. Like when somebody is grieving a betrayal or a loss, I've heard people say oftentimes, well, real friends would have just stayed. Kind of like, don't worry about it. They weren't real friends anyways, right? But the truth is that even though this is accurate, might be accurate, it really bypasses the raw wound or of the rejection, the loneliness, or the loss, the raw grief that the person is experiencing. So what we can say instead could be, in a healthier version, could be, that must have felt so painful, or just in the present moment, hey, that must feel really painful. How about saying, I'm here to sit with you in this. You're not alone. Or tell me what this has been like for you. Tell me your story. And it makes me think about how important it is to listen to one another's stories. Again, Nasedyanka, this is what my ancestors did. I bet your ancestors did that too, because that's the old world. I think that's the old world for most of us around this planet. Our ancestors would sit around in a circle or in a line, I don't know, they would sit together with each other and they would just share each other's ups and downs, each other's stories. Another example I wanted to share was related to immigration and to cultural pain. And I'll talk in the future a little more about this, since I'm an immigrant myself. And I've put a lot of effort in trying to make things work, and I see that it's not black and white, you know. So I've noticed that when somebody shares struggles with cultural adaptation or criticism, people often might say, well, if you don't like it, just go back. well, if you're complaining or if you're really struggling, why don't you just go back? Personally, I've heard this from many sources, and even though I can think about it and talk about it, I don't think that all people have the stamina to, I mean, many people just keep it silent, right? And it's not okay, because the truth is that this kind of a comment actually ignores the complexity of identity, belonging, and longing. What we can actually say instead of this comment is, hey, that sounds really, really hard. Can you tell me more? Or how about this? I'd love to understand what you're feeling right now. Or let's think through this together. And I would really say, hey, I'm not privileged to knowing your story, but I want you to know that you're not alone and I'm here with you. So whenever you feel ready to talk, I just want you to know that I'm available. Here's another point. How about the black and white thinking? Like, specifically black and white thinking, which is a type of a distortion, cognitive distortion, in opposition to the gospel of Christ. Well, have you thought of that? Black and white responses in general reduce the complexity of the reality of people's experiences into ultimatums. Black and white thinking often protect the comfort of the speaker rather than care for the other person. So instead of black and white thinking, Christ's way actually is to enter the gray. Christ dines with the outcast, you guys. Christ comforts the afflicted. Christ listens with divine attention. He came here to save the fallen. He didn't fix the bleeding woman, for example. In Luke 8:43 through 48, it says that he actually let her tell her whole story. And this calls into attention more about what active listening is and what the sacred presence without judgment actually implies. So this leads to the sacred space definition. So what does it really mean to hold space, let alone to be a healing presence, to hold sacred space? Well, it is being fully present here and now, in body, mind, spirit, and emotions, and heart, and all of your parts. It also means to withhold judgment rather than making assumptions, rather than concluding like this person must be this because they say that. Withhold judgment. Just offer your presence, for crying out loud. It also means to honor the other person's experience. People are different. And people are so different. If you think of us being created in the image and likeness of God, this is like the fingerprint. If fingerprints are so different across the globe, and some people don't even have fingerprints, by the way, what about our DNA? How much more would it be that this God, like spirit infused human in front of you would carry divinity within themselves, and it is okay, and they are worthy of being honored for the different human being that they are. Holding space also means to reflect Christ's compassionate presence. Let's see what else I wanted to share here. Okay, there's a quote. Saint Silouan the Athonite, he said, keep your mind in hell and despair not. Keep your mind in hell and despair not. So this is not only about personal spiritual struggle, but also learning to dwell with others in their depths without pulling away. So how can we be better with other people? How can we practice empathy and compassion? How can we be there and do nasedyanka with each other? One way is make sure to listen deeply. Not just, hear it with your ears, but listen to the body language. Listen beyond the message of the person. Listen to their vibration. Listen to their emotional story. Listen to the depth of the pain of their story. Resist the urge to fix. There is a way to fix and there is a way to be, right? We're not human doers, we're human beings, like we say. So resist that urge to fix. Be in silence. Be in just non-doing. This is plenty healing. Validate the emotions. Whatever the emotions are, just validate them. Hey, I can see why you would feel this. Hey, that makes sense. Oh, I get it, right? Enter the vibe of the emotional state of the other person. This is a way to validate and to truly be there with somebody else, to be a healing presence, to be a witness, not a judge. Pray with, not just for. And by the way, wow, what kind of a spiritual bypassing that can be. And I've heard it many a times, unfortunately. People who say, oh, I'll pray for you. But in reality, sometimes this can come with a good intention, sure. But many times it can be a bypassing statement, almost like saying like, hey, you're just so complex for me. I have too much anxiety, so I can't wait for us to change the topic. Let me move on, right? So not only pray for somebody and leave, but pray with. Keep in your heart the prayer of somebody. And of course, if people don't want you to pray for them, be mindful to respect their wishes, I would say. Another point is what the churches teaches about presence. The holy tradition, Orthodox Christian tradition, is actually relational. Again, that's what Nasedyanka is. We all sit together and we share a meal. And in the Orthodox Christian church, we all share a trapeza. We all sit together, we share a meal. And not just the meal, it's not about the food, it's about the communion. So the life of the church actually is that. It is communion, not isolation, not detachment. The Eucharist is the model. God doesn't just offer advice. He offers himself, for crying out loud. He offers his body and blood. He offers himself. And so here's the question. How can you offer your time, your precious, valid heart, your hearing, your eyes, your heart to people who are in pain, in need? How can you listen to them compassionately and be present? Another part of this is that in the Orthodox Church, we are called to do the same, to become broken bread for one another. Don't be afraid to be broken. Vulnerability is one of the greatest assets. Vulnerability, brokenness is the only way in which we can reach depths. Just like the seeds I'm planting, right? They have to crack, they have to break so that something comes out of them. But it doesn't mean self-inflicted brokenness. It means break your expectations. It means break your selfish ego. It means break your standards, the rigid views of how people are, and sit with them, sit with the discomfort. See what happens. Marinate. Another point I had was the wake-up call. I want to talk about the call to action, kind of like I wanted to really invite you guys to, consider what repentance is. Repentance in true Orthodox Christian words, meaning is a real, true change in depth. It's a change, a turnaround. So really repenting of our own bypassing habits, of our own sins, would look like relearning how to be present. It would let us kind of like find this sacred act of sitting with somebody in their pain, just as Christ sits with us. In Galatians 6:2, it is said, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. It's not just a saying, it's a law. It's mind-blowing. Okay, so then we have some other stuff. How about this? Practical tools for holding space. Pauses. Pause before speaking. Ask yourself, am I here to fix or to listen? I think people have forgotten how to be comfortable with silence, how to find the power and the enlightenment in the silent pauses. So I want to challenge you, use open-ended and gentle questions rather than rigid black and white questions. Be comfortable with silence, I just mentioned. learn the difference between sympathy and empathy. This may be a huge one, but I think it's worthy of exploration. In general, when I think of sympathy and empathy, empathy is more participatory, whereas sympathy is actually silently judging. And I'll give you some examples that I actually wrote here. So, sympathy feels for somebody from a distance, right? There's a disconnect, like, I don't want to get your disease, mental, emotional, whatever. Empathy feels with someone from within their pain. Sympathy often involves pity. Oh, poor you, poor thing. Empathy involves presence and connection. Sympathy says, that's sad, but at least minimizing. Empathy says, that sounds really hard. I'm here with you. You're not alone. Really validating and holding the heaviness. Sympathy keeps emotional boundaries for comfort. Empathy is willing to enter discomfort to be present, right? Sympathy is kind of like, don't want to get myself dirty, stay away from me. Empathy is like, no, I'm there with you. I'm not afraid. I'm above all that. I'm with you. I'm above the dirt and the fears. I'm not afraid to enter the pain, is what I'm talking about. I'm not above you, right? Don't get me wrong with that one. Empathy is about entering into that space with the person who is hurting. Sympathy is, I'm better than you. Keep me away from that. Don't want to get involved. Sympathy can accidentally minimize pain, whereas empathy validates and honors pain. Sympathy says, I'm sorry for you. Empathy says, I'm here with you. I don't have the answers, but hey, I'm not leaving, right? So, marinate on that. I think that this is good enough for today. I did have a few extra things that I wrote here. Actually, maybe as we start wrapping up, I'll just share just a few of those quotes I put in my journal. But yeah, listen to this. How about this one? Even though it feels like people are turning away from me, I trust that my soul is turning toward itself, growing stronger in love and in truth. Every time I set a boundary, even trembling, even through anxiety, I'm sending new roots deep into the soil of my real life. How about this one? I trust that my heart is healing in this silence. I have spent years bending myself to be liked, but now, even though it feels lonely, I'm standing upright. Like a tree in winter, I look barren, but my core is growing thicker with wisdom, with loyalty to the person God made me to be. I think I may share just another one. How about this one? Each moment I refuse to gaslight myself. Each time I honor my true feelings without shame. I am quietly growing a life that is real, solid, and blessed. Others may not see that work yet, but like the sap hidden under the bark, life is rising inside me. You guys, I hope that this brings you some inspiration. My journal has a little tree that I love, even the texture of. Feel free to share your thoughts. Feel free to ask yourselves, what keeps me going even when my branches are not bearing fruit, fragrance, flowers, blossoms? When I feel stuck in a rut, what keeps me going? And who is it for you that keeps that sacred presence for you? Who have you kept sacred presence for? Who have you been there for? Not absorbing the pain. I'm not talking about absorbing pain, but sharing, again, non-judgmentally and fiercely unafraid to be human. Well, with that, I'm going to start wrapping up. Thank you for your attention. Finally, I got to create my video today. I think that this is going to be good enough. No extra effects, no glow, and no specialties. But hey, I hope this brings you some inspiration. And I'll see you soon. And for those of you who are new, again, this is the purpose of my channel, Nasydyanka. We sit and we talk and we grow together. And for those who are following this channel, thank you again for your time and presence. I hope this finds you well, and I send you positivity, and Christ is risen. Bye.